Hey guys, how are you doing? In this video, we're building something very interesting. We're building a URL shortening service. The complete backend will be built using Golang, and this is an intermediate level project. So if you're a complete beginner with Golang, I suggest you check out the other series on my channel. And if you're an advanced developer, then you can check out the other advanced project series on my channel. This is for intermediate developers where you have done the basic and the beginner level projects, and now you want to take it to the next level. So in this video, we're using Golang, we're using Fiber, and we're using Redis as the database. It's an in-memory database. And then we'll be using Docker to help us create this Redis instance and also for other things. So we'll be using Docker file as well as Docker Compose to build the entire project. So without any further delays, let me show you what the project is going to look like from a 10,000 feet perspective. You'll have your user interacting with the project, and you'll have a server running with Golang and Go Fiber at the port 3000. So that means the user will interact with the program at port 3000. And the Go Fiber or the Golang server will interact with our Redis server, which will be our database at port 6379, which is the default Redis port. So as you can notice, there is no other database here. You're just using Redis for this project. Okay, so this is a great project to learn how to use Redis, how to use Go Fiber, how to use Golang, all of them together, and to creating an actual running project that will be a URL shortening service. And this is what the project structure is going to look like. So you'll have an API folder, you'll have the database folder inside API folder, then helpers, routes, and Docker file, and the DB folder, which will have its own Docker file. Now, this Docker file is basically going to contain some containers for Redis, and this Docker file is going to have Golang specific code. And then you'll have your routes, which will have the routes on which you're going to post, and you're going to shorten your URLs. Helpers will basically have some functions for helping with the routes, and database will have some logic to connect with the database. All right, and then somewhere outside here, we'll have our Docker Compose .yml file, which will help us to, which will basically bring everything together for us. And this is the project structure. So without any delays, let's actually start writing the code. As you can see, I have my terminal open. So I'm going to create a directory, shorten URL Fiber Redis. I think that's a great name for a project. And YT, just to indicate that I'm building this for YouTube. I'm going to cd into it and say shorten. And then I'm going to create another directory inside this called API. And I'm going to cd into the API directory. And that I'm going to create three different directories. The first I'm going to create is called database. And so you'll just ls, and then you'll create another directory called helpers, and you'll ls again just to see that both of them exist. And then you'll create another directory called routes. So just ls to ensure all three of them exist. And now the API is the folder which I want to initiate as a Golang project. So I'm going to say go mod init github.com/Akhil, and the name of the project is, in this case, shorten URL Fiber Redis. Now, it's not necessary that you keep the name of the folder as the same as the name of the project, but in my case, I always like doing that just to keep consistency so that I don't confuse myself later on, right? So it's Fiber Redis and YT. Okay. Now, once you ls, you'll see that it has created a go.mod file for you, which is like, if you're coming from a JavaScript background, it means it's a package.json file, which is going to contain the list of all the external dependencies that you're going to include into this project. Make sense? So now what I want to do is I want to cd out into the main folder, and I would like to open this project up using VS Code. In my case, you could be using any other code editor. So I have the main folder, which is API, and just to ensure you have database helpers routes. And now inside API, you're going to have its own Docker file, which I had shown you in the diagram. Let me find it if I have it. Its own Docker file, and then in your DB folder, you'll have its own Docker file again. So outside this, you'll have two folders, data and DB. And completely outside, you're going to have a Docker Compose .yml file. And inside your DB, you're going to have a Docker file which is going to help you start your Redis container. So you'll create Docker and file with a small f. I think that's the mistake I made here. I kept it capital F, should be small f, Docker file. Anyhow, so this Docker file, right, the one for the database for Redis is going to be quite simple. So we'll go ahead and actually write the code for it. So we'll say, I want you to pull the image from Redis Alpine, and I want you to expose 6379 as the port for this instance that you create, the Redis server that you create. All right. Now I want to go inside I want to close this down, go inside the API folder, go inside routes. Inside routes, you'll have two files. One will be resolve, the other will be shorten.go. So one will be resolve.go, and the other will be shorten.go. Make sense? And inside database, you'll have database.go, and inside helpers, you'll have helpers.go. So you'll say database.go, and inside here, you'll say helpers.go. So by the way, this project series is going to be 10 minutes video each, and about 10 videos, maybe lesser than that, 8 to 9 videos. But it's going to be 10 minutes videos each, because a lot of people have messaged me saying that they do this on the side. So whenever they come back from work, they get like half an hour that they invest into learning Golang or whatever that I'm teaching. So they spend about half an hour. So that means 10-minute video, and then once you practice it, it becomes like half an hour. So this is the perfect size of the video. I'm going to continue the bigger series as well, where I make like 1 hour videos, but this for some of the intermediate and advanced projects, I'm going to keep it 10 minutes each, so that somebody who's a senior developer who's learning on the side, for them it kind of makes a lot of sense, right? So here for resolve.go, what we'll do is we'll actually work on shorten.go. So come to your shorten.go file, and here you call it package routes. So these two files, right, resolve.go and shorten.go, they're in the routes folder. So that's why they're called package routes. And this is usually the structure that you follow with Golang, the project structure, in the sense the main folder has multiple files, and all those files will have the same name of the project of the folder, which in this case is routes. So they'll be all package routes. Now, when you want to import that in a different file like main.go or any other file, it'll become really easy for you, right? It'll become super easy. Because you'll be able to import that package very easily. Now, speaking of main.go file, right? I'll have the main.go file inside my API folder itself. So I'll go to my API folder and I'll say main.go file. And the main.go file is going to contain a lot of the important data. But for now, let me first show you something in the shorten.go file that I was working on. So you'll say package routes, and you'll import a couple of things here, which we'll talk about in things that we'll need. But the most important thing, if you have been following with my beginner level project series, you probably have not seen this before. So which is basically defining your request and defining your response. Now, if you define your request and response as structs, that means there's like a format that the front end can expect the request and response to be in. That just makes your code very stable. That just makes your front end very stable. So I like having my request and response as structs defined properly. And this is something that you may not have seen if you've been following with my beginner level tutorials, but with my advanced tutorials, you probably would have seen something like this, right? So here in your request, you'll define that in the request, I'll have my URL, I'll have my custom short and my expiry. And in my response, I will get the URL, the custom short, and I'll get the expiry, when is it expiring. And I'll have some rate limiting here. So I'm going to say rate remaining, how many are remaining, and rate limit reset. So we have rate limit reset. Now you don't want the front end to make unlimited number of requests, right? So you want to have some sort of rate limiting, and also resetting of the rate limit when you want to reset it. So it usually is done like 24 hours or whatever, but let's see, whatever we like it, we'll keep that limit out here. And now when you define structs, you know that this is how you define structs, as in you have to define which data type it is. So struct basically is your own data type that you create, but it has multiple data fields that are of data type that Golang understands. For example, URL in this case is string, which Golang understands, right? And your custom short is going to be a string. Your expiry is a time duration. So you'll use the time package and create time duration. This means that definitely out here you need the time package. And if you've been following with my beginner level tutorials, you know that Golang does not understand JSON on its own, so it has to do a lot of encoding and decoding and all of that with JSON and serialization basically. So you have to tell Golang that, hey, this is what it's going to look like when you come across JSON. Let's say when you receive a request in JSON, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to look like URL, which is all small URL, whereas the field that Golang understands and works with, which is a string, will be capital URL. All right. Now, custom short is just going to be like this: JSON. In case you're not aware, I'm using these backticks, which is the key next to 1 on my keyboard. So I'm using backticks, and between that I'm writing JSON, and then these are double quotes, and I'm writing short. And here I'll be writing expiry. And once I'm done with this project, I'll also push this on my GitHub account. So if in case you make any mistakes, don't worry. I'm always there to kind of help you out. And I'm also quite responsive in the comments. So if you have any problems, you can put it in the comments below. I'll help you out. If you have a bigger issue than that, bigger error, or something that you're not able to figure out, or if you have any request, you can also reach out to me on my LinkedIn channel. In the description box, I usually keep my link to my LinkedIn profile. So here, this is time.duration again, which is expiry. Your rate limit, it's usually an integer, how many are left, integer. And your reset, when does it reset? So it's basically time.duration again. And here you want to keep it URL. Make sure you enclose this in double quotes. And then here you'll have again short. And here you'll have expiry. So these three are the same as before. No changes there. Here you'll have rate limit. So you'll say JSON rate _ limit. For rate limit reset, you're going to have JSON rate limit reset. When does it reset? So usually it can depend basically on whatever time you want to keep it. We can keep 24 hours or 1 hour, 2 hours, depends. So this is what your request and response is going to be structured like. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll work on my main.go file, because that's usually in any Golang project, that's the first file that's basically the program enters through the main file, and it enters through the func main, the main function. So here, wherever you write your main.go file, you have to start like this, package main, and then you're going to import a couple of packages, just like we did there with time package in the shortener.go file. I'll just close the other file so that just everything appears to be a little more organized. So here you'll have a function called setupRoutes. In case you've been doing my other projects with GoFiber, like the CRM project and the HRMS project, you know about this function. This function basically has the list of all your routes. So you'll pass fiber.app here, and in this case app, I'll tell you what app is. So let me first create these two functions here. So let's say app.get /URL, routes.resolve URL. So we'll have it won't be a surprise if you see a function called resolve URL now, because in our package routes, which means that either the resolve file or the shorten file, which both belong to the package routes, we'll have this function called resolve URL, right? Which will be called once somebody hits this /URL app.get with the get method, and app dot post slash API slash version 1 comma routes dot shorten URL. So this is going to be our most important function, the shorten URL function, which is going to be in the shorten.go file, obviously. And so the shorten URL function is going to be the most important, and you can see that it's part of the routes package. Now comes the main function. So the main function, in case you've ever used Express with Node.js, you usually create a variable called app, and that's the variable that you pass around, which becomes an instance of the Express library, right? The Express, whatever that you get access with. So Fiber has been like the people who built Fiber, right? They have taken complete reference of Express, and then they wanted it to behave like Express. So that means you'll create a variable called app, and it will be fiber.new. Now, if you're calling Fiber, that means Fiber needs to be here. You need to also import Fiber, right? And so what you're going to say is you're going to say github.com/go-fiber. That's the name of the main library. Fiber/v2. And I'll also need the middleware logger, but for now I think this will suffice. So you'll have fiber.new, and I'll also need the go.environment library, and I'll load my variables. Sorry, I'll load my environment variables. And actually, let me do one thing. Let me go ahead and create my .env file. So in my API folder, right, I'll create a .env file. Go ahead and create that. In the .env file, you're going to have your database address, db6379. You know that that's the port, that's the default port for Redis. And then you're going to have db password, which is going to be empty for now. You won't have any password. And the port, like I had shown you in the diagram, the port for our main application is going to be port 3000, which is what the user is going to use to be able to interact with this project, which is localhost 3000 is also the domain, right? And the API quota to begin with is going to be 10. So that was my environment file. And now heading back to the main.go file, this is what I'm going to basically load, right? All the variables that I've just defined. Now I'll check for the error. If error is not equal to nil, I'm going to fmt.println error. And I'll put some spacing here just so that everything makes sense. Now I'll also use the logger. So I'll say app.use and logger.new. Sorry. And I'm going to call this function setup routes. I'll say setup routes. And I'm going to pass app here, app, which is an instance of Fiber, which I've created using the new function that Fiber library gives me. And so when I pass app here, as you can see, the setup routes function also is expecting something called app, which is of type fiber.app. Completely makes sense. And I'm going to create the server here. So I'll say app.listen os.get environment and app_port. This is what's going to start my server. And I'm going to enclose that into log.wait. Now this means that you need the log package here, and you need logger from Fiber, and also you also need fmt. So I'm going to say fmt, I'm going to say log. I'm going to also, you need OS, because that's how you'll get access to your variables, which is your environment variables, right? The environment variables, you'll get access to them using OS. So you'll say OS here. And after your Fiber v2, you'll say github.com/go-fiber/v2/middleware/logger. And since I'm calling the go.environment package, I also need to import that library. So I'll say github.com/joho/go.environment. So this kind of completes all of the main.go file at least. And you have the project structure which is complete. You have your main.go file complete, environment file is complete. That's quite a lot of work that we've achieved in this video. So in the next video, we'll continue with our shorten function and our resolve function. So thanks a lot for watching. Do subscribe to this channel in case you haven't subscribed, because I keep coming up with awesome content like this. And I'll see you in the next video.